Hi, everybody. It's Rochelle. Welcome back to another episode of the Artful Leaders interview series, where we are really mining the wisdom and the experience of folks who are working at the intersection of the arts, education, healing, social change, and really looking to them for guidance on how do we move forward during this crazy time. And so I'm excited today to have Renee Zukin with us. Hey,
Yay.
is a writer, an educator, a mom, the host of a show not too different from the Artful Leadership series. And I'm excited today because we're really going to be talking about the power of writing to heal and inspire change and growth. And so I think it's just such an awesome topic. So, Renee, hi, welcome.
Hi. Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. I love your group. I love what you do. The artful educators and leaders. They are so needed in the world, and I honor each and every one of you.
Thank you. So, Nate, tell us a little bit about what you're up to these days. Like, what are you excited about? What are you creating that you want us to know about?
Yeah, always so many things, but the biggest thing that I have been working on as of late is um, taking what I know and have done in the classroom with my students, and what I've done kind of in the outside world with, the hosting the series about raising collective consciousness, and doing that work that supports the inner work to see that outer change, and melding them together in creating really this amazing uh, program that I'm so excited about that combines that work, really using writing to heal, and then using that healing and the experience for others to be able to lead from that place of not being healed, because we are constantly healing. Right? And I'm just so excited about how it's all come together. Um, because, I've always just been, the reason I got into teaching to begin with is because I really believe in the possibility of everybody really just living their best selves, being connected with themselves and each other, uplifting the community. And I feel like I'm able to do that in such a different way now with, adults, not just, the teenagers that I work with. And it's just so vital, especially as you mentioned, that, this time has been incredible and there's a lot to process. So, yeah, I'm fired up.
Yeah, yeah, awesome. So, I'm curious. Tell us a little bit about your own experience with writing and like how has that been powerful for you as an educator, as a mom, as someone who's navigating their way through all these different things going on. How has that helped you?
Yeah, it's really been mostly a lifelong journey in and out of writing. Like a lot of people, I kept a journal as a teenager, started when I was like 12, and it was like, oh, this is what we did today, this is who was there, yada, 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 just kind of recounting the things that were happening. And then, of course, as I got older and things began to shift and life had, different challenges, it became a real clear way um, to not just recount what happened, but how I was feeling about what was happening. And being able to see it, kind of come out on the page offered me a totally new perspective. And so while I didn't, in my teens and 20s, I didn't really think about, oh, this is my tool, right? I just did it because it felt good and I felt, things kind of shift as I did. And it wasn't until I stopped writing, actually, that I realized how important it was to return to it and to use it really almost as a form of like meditation, for me, a way to reconnect and to kind of bypass all the stuff that your mind is busy thinking about and doing. And I didn't write for years, actually. And then, my world sort of fell apart a little bit. I was transitioning jobs in the middle of a divorce. I had 3 small kids and was dealing with, anxiety and OCD symptoms, and, everything just felt like it was crumbling. And I was like, what do I do? And I returned, I picked up, got a notebook at Walgreens. I was like, this is what I used to do. I got to try something.
Yeah.
And it was amazing. It's not like a one and done, but really through a process, over the course of the year, I got to really decide what I wanted my next, the next experience to be. What did I want my life to look like? If everything was falling apart, what did I want to build and create? And the writing really allowed that space for me to decide. I could process the stuff that went through, and and at the time, I didn't think of anything of it really until I started writing poetry on top of the journaling. And I actually ended up turning that poetry into an album. So I recorded an album with these songs, and the album title was Sense of Redemption. And it really pulled together like, a couple years worth of experiences as I came out of that. All those big transitions, and really honored the value that the writing brought.
Yeah.
And I didn't do it alone. I also found a writing coach who was amazing, and I didn't even know what a writing coach was before. And I was like, oh, but I'm not writing a book. But that's not what she did. She really allowed for the space and the support to get clear. So it's been amazing. It's been an amazing journey, and that was 15 years ago.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. And so now you are bringing that to the community in a new way. You've got a Facebook group, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, the Rebel Writers.
Rebel Writers. And you're doing a Facebook challenge right now.
I am.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Mm-hmm. It has been exciting. We are in the midst of a 5-day training, 5 ways to kick writer's block to the curb. And, it may sound like, writer's block, oh, but I'm not a writer. And that's the real key piece to the Rebel Writers. We call ourselves rebels because, we might not be the conventional writer, not necessarily, not 9-time best-selling authors, although if you are, fantastic, we welcome you also. But, if you're writing anything, you're writing, and the rebels are really the ones who, maybe take the road less traveled, or, life has been a little more like this, and, or they're dissatisfied with the status quo, and that's, something you and I have talked about before too, that we're really passionate about, is really making change in our communities. And it takes a little bit of rebellion to do that, and to be able to write it through and talk through the change we wish to see, and doing that work ourselves as well.
Yeah. Very cool. Just as you're telling your story, there's so many pieces that resonate with me in my life experience too. Like I remember when my mom gave me one of my first journals. I always wrote poems and things, but I had like this folder with all these napkins and
Yep.
flyers from the concert, or whatever, like the pile of stuff. And then my mom at one point gave me this really cool book and was like, I think it would be really helpful for you to just keep all of this in one place and start to write. And, and initially, yeah, you're doing the whole, today I wore my Doc Martens and,
Yes!
and I listened to this album or whatever. But then it as you said, it really turned into this incredible tool for reflecting on my life and kind of writing a new story. And I know there's so many people that talk about, writing a new narrative and how we are the author of our story. And there's something about writing about the past that somehow helps us start to think about well, what's next and how do I want to show up differently and what are my dreams and aspirations and desires and obstacles and all those things. And then I ended up becoming an expressive arts therapist and like kind of diving into the power of the arts in general to heal. But and I love how your sort of organic process is so much of like how I have learned to work as an arts-based therapist, where it's like one art form kind of leads into another. And you begin by writing down the words, and then if you stay with it, it comes and it finds a new shape. It
Yeah.
finds a bigger shape that then, because at first it's kind of like your own relationship to the material, and then it becomes something that you can really share with others, impact
Yes.
others with.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, a lot of people are scared. They're like, "Oh, I don't want to write my experience." And I'm like, "You're not just taking what you put in your journal and, plastering it out for the world to see." Which is, it's an honest experience, and people have that, but there is that process of, and you have to start with getting it out first.
Yeah.
It has to come out in its, natural, organic, whatever it's going to be sort of way, so you can see it differently. And then once you have that different perspective of whatever's going on, you can see the lessons, you can see the gifts, and those are the pieces that you can share.
Right. I'm thinking about, I'm trying to remember what book it is, but Brene Brown talks a lot about this, like the stories we tell ourselves about what's going on in our lives, right? And she talks about writing the shitty first draft.
Yes.
Like take a pass at just getting all the crap out that's like, oh, and I hate everybody and nobody cares about me. And, and then being like, oh, I see where I've been filling in the gaps or making up a story. I see my part in the thing. And then we can start to really dive into
Yeah.
that healing work of like, oh, this is where I really get to look at things differently and show up differently.
Mhm.
Um, so that's really exciting. And doing that work, I think anytime we take on these creative pursuits, if we kind of take off the pressure, right, of like, I'm going to be an author and write a book or whatever,
Yeah.
because it can be really daunting. Whereas, like, I love that rebel identity that you're fostering of like, I can write in whatever way is helpful to me in my world, and I get to define that,
Mhm.
in whatever way works for me as an individual and be a part of this community. So,
Mhm.
I love
Mhm.
it. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. It's been so fun. Well, and you really touched on something, when you're worried about that, sort of audience facing, you know, that brings in the expectation and the judgment, and we know full well that that like cuts off that that flow to the creative process. Um, and that's what we're focusing on this week. It's we identifying where those blocks are, and just having a new relationship to things like procrastination, and understanding why we put off things, and whether it's intentional or whether it's an avoidance, or whether it's something, it's a gift. There's the duality in all those things, and that self-doubt and the imposter syndrome. And so it's been an amazing experience so far. I mean, all this work has, but these last 2 days, and so I'm excited for what's coming forward, and certainly not too late to join. But
Yeah.
but that piece there, right? Of, if we let our attachment to the outcome
Mm.
define what we're going to create, it's not gonna align. It's not gonna feel in that flow, and yeah, it's such a beautiful process, and difficult. I mean, we make it sound simple, but it can be a challenge to reframe
Yeah.
consistently.
Yeah. And I was thinking, like, it's funny. I've been playing a long time for an idea for a book. And and part I was gonna start writing it like right before the pandemic hit, and then spending all day on screens and everything. I was like, oh heck no, I'm not gonna spend any more time like sitting in front of this screen and writing my story. So I'm just kind of curious, like what would be some tips that you would have for someone like me who feels like I do have some stories to tell? There might be a book in here somewhere. I'm a little overwhelmed. I'm looking at like, a very like a 30-year period of my life. There's
Right.
so many gems I want to pull things out of. And so it's kind of like, what?
Yeah, where do I even start?
Yeah, so what would your tips be for someone like me to just get the flow going and get excited about it and maybe get past that like, oh Lord, I got
Right, right. Well, and I think two things. Because I think you have to have the plan and the structure um, for the creativity to flow, but also in order for that flow to occur, you have to remember why, right? And it's like ultimately, what do you want this story to provide for others? Right? Not why is it important to you, but why is it important universally? And you know that already, I'm guessing, right? And starting from that end piece, um, and then getting the structure in place, and maybe it's like Nike, right? Just do it. Um, Picking out the sections of time that you want to devote to it, and if you don't want to be on screen, start with that pen and paper. In fact, I would encourage that just anyway. Um, and then as you are writing, you can see what's connected to that big vision and what's not, and where the pieces are. And again, like you just mentioned, the shitty first draft that comes to play in all sorts of things. You get to go back and refine and change it. So don't worry about what it's going to look like, what each piece is, because that'll figure itself out along the way. But the only thing really you're attaching and committing to is that vision of what you want,
bring
this
to the world. Yeah.
to bring out. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And I've been wondering like what other, and maybe this isn't your area of expertise, and maybe it is, but like, like, do I want to get on my voice memos and just start telling stories? Because I feel like once I start to ramble, like all these things come out that I don't necessarily think about when I'm like, writing. So that's one of the things I've been thinking about, or like doing some interviews with like folks I worked with, because I want to do like a whole thing about like the work that I've done. And like, oh, maybe I can do some interviews with former students, or, just different things to
Yeah.
get something to work with that doesn't feel so alone and dry with me.
Yes. I love those ideas. I think the voice memos are great, and you can hire people to transcribe those for you. Uh, that's actually work that I've done. I've had a freelance writing and editing business for years, and that's one of the things that I've done is that transcription, so that you're not working from nothing first. And I think the conversations with former students and other colleagues. I think that's a beautiful way to get the a sense of the alignment, and connection, because it can be super isolating. Right.
Yeah. Yeah, and just kind of being there with your own brain, just like,
Yeah.
and especially at this time when we've been alone so much, just trying to find a way in. So yeah, that's really cool. So
Writing groups. Get yourself a couple of buddies. I mean, in the Rebel Writers Facebook group, we do a Friday free write every Friday. And there's people in there that you can find for accountability, and but yeah, I've never been. Go ahead.
Sorry, I interrupted you. I was like, I got excited. I'm like, say more about that. Like, what about the free write that you all do?
Yeah, so it's just I show up on Fridays. I show up just as much for myself as I do for my group. Consistently 9 a.m. Friday morning, we do Friday free writes. There's usually a theme, and it has to do with some kind of universal theme, and whatever is kind of at top of mind for folks. Then I just give sentence starters. And then we go. 8 minutes. I set an 8-minute timer, and we write together, and then we share kind of what comes up and through. And it's just been such a beautiful experience. And to have that consistency of, you know, at least to start that once a week, I know that I'm going to devote this time to my writing. It opens up the space in the way to do more of it outside of that time as well. And so cool to see other people, in the same, having similar experiences and able to talk through that and all that. Yeah. So.
Yeah, and there's always that balance that we need, right? Of like support and connection and accountability too.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
right? Like you were saying, for a creative process to happen, there does have to be like a certain amount of structure in order for things to like, you need that little fire under you behind, right? To like make it happen.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, we I was just talking about this today in the group with procrastination. Like, I we did the exercise we did. We wrote breakup letters with procrastination. It was so much fun, and so much stuff came out. And what I realized is that for me, like my rebel self is like hates the word commitment, hates the word structure, hates. I'm not. You can't put me in a box. Yeah. Um, yeah, exactly. Like those were, and I'm in a position now where I could recognize that that is actually, does me more harm than good, because I'm not committing to this time space task. What I'm committing to, again, is that larger vision and what I want to put out in the world. And so it doesn't mean that within that structure, okay, I'm going to write every Saturday from 8 to 10. That doesn't mean I'm sitting at the computer for 2 hours straight, banging my head against the keyboard. Right. It means that I'm doing whatever tasks that will connect back to that greater vision and allow me. So sometimes it is getting in the flow and I'm writing nonstop. Other times it's, doing research or having the conversations, right? That get you inspired for the next thing you need to put in. Like you can't, like you said, you can't just be in your own head, right? The connections and the experiences and all the other things that you're doing that connect back to that, larger vision commitment is what belongs in that time and space that you've committed to doing that work.
Well, and I love everything you're saying about that bigger vision, because to me that, that's the connection to that artful leadership that I often talk about. And that's really the work of leaders, is having a vision of what you want to bring to the world and doing what it takes to make that happen.
Yep.
And adjusting your ways of being or whatever it is so that you can, and using whatever mechanism you need to get that out there, but like clear on what that thing is. And that thing could be a whole bunch of things, right?
Absolutely.
There's so many ways to approach that. Yeah. So I'm curious for folks who are listening. Most of the people that I find are listening to this are educators, folks that are serving young people in some way, whether that's in creative youth development, after school, in school, support folks, therapists, healers, all kinds of stuff. Let's talk a little bit about like the power of writing at this time. Like, I know we kind of hit on it a little bit earlier on, but like, why do you think it's important right now?
Yeah, I think, whatever modality you choose, but certainly some kind of creative expression, it's so vital to be able to take the time to process. what's happened, what has happened. Um, like we were saying, not just so we can process the past, but so we can decide what we want our future to look like. Um, and so many of us, I taught this year and I taught all online, which was, had its own set of challenges, different than, yeah, I know. Where's my blue light blocker glasses? Um,
Right.
yeah. And for 12 to 14-year olds, it's a new ball game as well. And they were going through so much differently, obviously age and experience. But when I was able to give them a space to communicate in whatever way, whether it was through making a collage or, writing a paper or whatever, um, things come out that wouldn't necessarily in a standard year, not just because of what happened, but because of, the the different structure of the online schooling that we were doing this year, put everybody out of their comfort zone a little bit and allowed for flexibility. And, we still, obviously, ultimate goal was following our standards, right? I teach literacy. I do academic support for students where I'm helping them with all their coursework. And, um, and it was so lovely to see that we want students to succeed in the skills that we're teaching, regardless of the modality, regardless of the content. Um, and as we gear up for a the next year ahead, and you know people are going back to quote unquote normal, I don't want to forget that. And I think it's so vital for all our educators and all our people who work with youth to help be the voice to make sure that doesn't happen,
Yeah.
so we don't forget that there are other ways to do things
Yeah.
that are just as effective, if not more holistic. The buzzwords are social emotional learning. Let's let it not just be a buzzword. Let's really take care of each other and figure out how we can, help our students heal along the way, which doesn't mean that we don't have to have the answers. We
Right.
just have to provide the space.
Right. And that's what's so cool about creating space for reflection and creative expression is a lot of times the answers emerged in community together when
Mhm.
we do that. And that's one of the, so I work with schools and organizations that are serving youth that are impacted by a lot of various challenges. And one of the things that keeps coming up when I'm talking to teams is they have not had the time to reflect,
Mhm.
really sit and think about like, whew, how did this year impact us? Who are we now? What did we discover matters most? Um, and what do we do about that now? I was listening to a podcast with Esther Perel yesterday, was talking about how this time has impacted us in a way where so many of us have walked out of this situation with a deeper sense of what matters most to us.
Yeah.
And so how do we, I feel like writing and having this kind of reflection can really help us tap into that.
Mhm.
And another thing is, when that I've talked a lot about on this show is the trauma, right? The trauma that so many folks have experienced during this time, the loss,
Yes.
whether it had to do with COVID or the social justice uprising or just life.
Right.
Been through a lot, and my research in post traumatic growth this year, it's so interesting how much they talk about creative writing
Mhm.
as a really powerful tool for growth after trauma, because we're able to like get this stuff out, like you've been saying, make sense of it, and be able to move forward. And so I feel like for educators who've had such a traumatic experience this year and young people who've had such traumatic experiences, like rebel writing really has a place in how we move forward.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. You know, and I keep coming back to the word tangible, because as we're going through challenges and feelings and the mix of all of these things coming out of um, traumatic experiences of all kinds,
Yeah.
it's hard to see clearly.
Yeah.
And when, just like you said, when you get it out there, the end result is something tangible and outside yourself to look at. And it's that eagle eye perspective of, oh, this makes more sense. This is, um, and it's not stuck inside anymore. The energy of all that, uh, of the grief, of, the confusion, the overwhelm is allowed to move, and there's more space. Um, and I think that's really where the key is that, as with art, as with all creative expression, I mean, there's a reason it exists. and I think that's it. It moves whatever through us that
Yeah.
needs to move.
Yeah. And if you look at the sort of our stress biology and physiology, um, uh, Emily and Amelia Nagoski wrote this book on burnout, and they talk about completing the stress cycle. And like, we have all these experiences of stress that have an impact on our body because our body responds to those stressors, and we have that buildup of those stress hormones in our system. And if we don't find ways to come back to neutral, then that stress actually stays locked in our bodies. And so creative expression is one of the key ways to, like, so when you're saying moving it, that's not a made up thing. Like, not just a metaphorical thing. Like, that is
Right.
an actual thing that's happening in our bodies
Mhm.
when we, use creative expression as a tool. And any, and when I was working as an art therapist with young people like, what are you guys doing in there? Like, what are you really talking about? And it was like, it's not about that.
Right.
It's about, we're taking time to just move all of this stuff out of our bodies. We don't always make sense of it, and having that practice
Mhm.
of just being creative, and having those outlets, it really, really does something for our health and our wellness.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Speaking
Yeah.
my language.
I knew we had a thing or two to talk about. So I'm curious for you. I always have like a couple of questions that I ask folks as we're wrapping up, and I'm wondering,
Mhm.
um, what is something that you wish all educators knew?
Hmm.
Just off the top of the dome.
I wish all educators knew that so many things are coming. I'm like, there's no such thing as perfect, and we can love everybody. For ourselves, for each other, for our students, to just really humanize the experience, which is something that teachers don't often get from others towards them, but that we have to give to ourselves.
Yeah, I think that love is so important. And we've shied away so much from using that as in our language as educators. And I feel
Yeah.
like at the heart,
Hmm.
so at the
Hmm.
heart, we have to be able to
I
talk
say
about.
it all the time to my kids. I don't care. I
Yeah.
love you all. Sometimes I say it angrily.
You're driving me crazy, and I still love you. Yeah. Yeah. And then the last thing, oh Lord, my neighbor is coming out with this weed whacker. So we might have to
We'll see how this goes. What?
sign it. Um, I'm just curious. I know you've talked so much about how writing is a healing tool for you and everything, but I'm curious, like, what is your go-to when you need to take good care of yourself, as a mom, as an educator, as an entrepreneur, and all, like, what's your go-to?
Yeah, aside from writing, it is music for me, whether turning on something that's relaxing and centering or turning on something that's fun so I can get out of the funk. Music is very powerful. It can really pull us out of uh, in and out of different emotional spaces.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. So for all these folks who have stuck with us and listened to the end of our talk here, like what do you want to leave folks with? How do they find you? How do they get involved? What do you want to tell them as your
Yeah, the quickest, closest way to connect would definitely be through the Rebel Writers Facebook group. Obviously, we're talking to people who are all on Facebook. So if you just Google Rebel Writers, it will probably come up. But we can certainly put the link down in the comments here when we're done. That would be the quickest. And then, from there, obviously, feel free to message me. I've got websites and things like that, but really, if anything from today really connected with you, I would say start there.
Yeah, and I just want to put in one more pitch for your five keys to kicking writer's block to the curb. If you're an educator and you're wanting to do something kind of creative with some of your summer break, like this could be such a fun way. Just hop into that Facebook challenge and work with Renee and see, what might emerge, what kind of inspiration might emerge or release might emerge for you from just hopping in and doing some creative writing. And if you are interested in doing that kind of healing work in your organization or your school, my work is really about helping educational leaders prioritize their own well-being so they can lead with a full tank, and so they can really create a culture of community care that kind of sustains folks through all this stuff, and all these creative forms of expression are a part of that. So reach out to me. So I'd love to talk.
Yeah, I
So,
love that. You do
yeah.
such beautiful work.
Thank you. You too. I'm so glad we got a chance to talk. And if there are other ways we can continue to collaborate, that'd be great. Thank you so much for sharing your story and your inspiring work with us today.
Thank you.
All right. Namaste, friend. I'll see you around in the interwebs.